In this episode, I get to sit down with the fun and amazing Mareesa Stertz to discuss our personal experiences with psychedelic medicines. We get into the importance of respecting the power of these medicines and why you need to work with an experienced facilitator. This conversation is for anyone who wants to heal from deep trauma and learn how to use their voice for good. What you're going to learn is the importance of accepting and taking responsibility for your life, and how your depression may actually be denied expression. And lastly, the power of storytelling. This is so important because there's not enough people talking about the power psychedelics have on healthy self-discovery and how to use these medicines responsibly so that you can begin to live with a deeper sense of fulfillment. But one, I'm super excited. I have so many things I want to pick your brain about since we last spoke, because I have had many experiences now. Whereas when we first met, I had a whopping 0. And before we jump into that, I just want to kind of give you a couple of heads up here. So one, this is really just a conversation we're recording. Like, there is no like official framework thing. Like, I don't give a fuck. It's just us geeking out on topics that we enjoy. We just happen to be recording it. And then the other thing is, if at any time you notice there's a lag or your side freezes or mine does or whatever may happen, I don't know if you've ever used Riverside for anything, but the thing that's amazing about this...
Other people have recorded me, but I've never actually used it myself.
Oh, amazing. Well, if you ever need to, I strongly recommend it for no other reason than this one. So this is recording each of our feeds separately. So if it lags or freezes, it's actually recording clean because it's using both.
Cool.
So I learned that the hard way. So the very first time this, I was using this, it froze super hard for a while. And I was like, we were halfway through the conversation. I was like, fuck, is that there? Is that gone? I'm just going to act like it didn't happen, this whole thing. But luckily it's, we had it all. So if it happens, don't stress. And if it does, I won't.
Cool.
So
good. Okay. Sounds great.
Yeah. But with that being said, first off, Marissa, what is up, my friend?
Hello. Hi, Matthew. It's been
hello. It has. It's been a couple of years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been probably over 3 years because it was pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
But I'm super Good.
No, it was just like I'm trying to remember the last time we saw each other. It was a coffee shop, I think, in I would say 2018, maybe. 2018?
Yeah. Easily. And like I said, I was a pup in this world that we might dive into a little bit today at that time. But before we just jump into it, I would love just to hear personally quick little cliff notes on what's going on in your world and what you're up to.
Yeah. Oh boy. I'm coming at you from Costa Rica, where I've had the good fortune. I was traveling when COVID hit, and I had been here long enough to sort of get a sense of what was going on. And also I was going to move to Oakland, and I'm like, well, I could go live in a box while the world shuts down, or I could stay here in this jungle. And so I stayed here, and it has been one of the most amazing, rewarding, blessed decisions I've ever made in my life. And
oh, wow.
And this chapter is slowly beginning to wind itself down, just because it's a real moving and shaking time in life right now, and it feels like it's time to build. And I'm really glad I got to spend a few years slowing down and kind of catching up and doing a lot of healing work, sitting a lot with ayahuasca, and and now projects are stirring. So I'm working on the Global Psychedelic Society, which is a big thing. Maybe we break them up, but I'm working on that. I'm doing a lot of work with storytelling and helping people tell their personal stories as teachers, facilitators, entrepreneurs, creatives. And I am bringing the Sphinxes from the Never-Ending Story to Burning Man. So that's
Oh,
a big thing
okay.
to unpack, but
Yeah.
bringing a big art project. Stories at the core of it. I guess I'm also like working on a documentary about my own life's journeys and writing a play.
Hmm.
So technically, I think that's 5 projects right there. Yeah,
I was gonna
it's a
say, who
lot.
said hanging out in the woods is boring?
Oh my god. Yeah, I have to actually make effort to. Well, it's a lot of what I call trolling around on your computer. I'm like,
Yeah,
just yeah, a lot of computer time, but it's also it's like valuable foundation building that needs to happen. So I'm glad to be doing it.
I love this. Well, I have so many more questions, but I'll give you a little kind of update since we last saw each other. At that time, I had never experienced any medicine journeys, so no healing, you know, journeys, opportunities, or anything at that point. But I was I knew I was called to it. I just didn't know when or how. Like for me, it was very much, it would be a knowing versus I need to go out and like force the experience. But since I've worked now with many different medicines, and what I can say without question, and this is a conversation that I absolutely have almost grown obsessed with because of the impact it's had on me. But my very first journey, I worked with the very first 2 journeys. I worked with MDMA both times, and the first one, I say saved my life, and then the second one changed my life. And then I've gone on to work with many other medicines, psilocybin, LSD, DMT, um, uh, ayahuasca, but it was more of it's a blend. The shaman I was working with, and between that and psilocybin, I guess it was like a much milder dose than like a full Aya trip. But I've been very, very, very fortunate in my journeys and experiences, and it's something that I now say and believe to my core that if I could give one gift to the entire world, it would be at least one journey in the appropriate setting and the appropriate, support, because it hands down was the intersection of my life where everything began to change for the positive.
Right on. Glad to hear that. Was it hard for you to take that first step?
No, like I said, it's something that I had known I would eventually do for quite a while prior to the experience. But coming from, I was very much in a party scene at that time. I'm very fortunate to say that in all of the medicines that I have experienced since, I never experienced any of them in a party setting prior. So I didn't have any idea what the experience would be like. I had no, expectation going into it. It was purely to be with whatever came through. So I'm super grateful that I did not have any of those experiences in a non-healing environment prior to. Um, but no, there was really no fear for me. There was a lot of excitement, and the moment, so the very first journey that I had, it came almost immediately after one of my most shameful moments. It was one of the worst fights that Allison, my fiance, and I had in our relationship. And at the time, I was really struggling with managing my anger. And when I would get angry, it wasn't, it wasn't physical, but I would get right up to the point. And I was very verbal. I was very loud. It would be those types of experiences. And I also was in the process of really kicking a cocaine habit at the time, right? I had fallen into that world for several years, and naturally, I was spiraling in the wrong direction. And, a lot of the anger and the fights and stuff would come by way of, me being on a bender, or, being on the crash or whatever it was from the night before. And, This particular morning that I was referring to, or the evening rather, Allison and I got in this huge fight for what I don't even recall. But the moment that everything, like I knew I had to do something drastic because I was already in therapy. Hell, I was already coaching at that time. Right. So I was very much living this like double life as it felt to me. And so then the morning after this argument, Allison, it's that whole, I was the one that had a lot to say, 12 hours prior, but the moment you wake up, your mouth is shut and your tail's between your legs and you don't want to face anything. And, after about an hour of existing in the house together, saying nothing, all she says to me in a moment was, "Do you remember what you said to me last night?" And, like a real man, I said, "No." When in fact, I remembered quite a bit. But what I know is I didn't remember everything. And what I was more afraid of was hearing it back. Like I didn't want the reflection. So in that moment, I said, "No, I don't." And what she said to me, uh, I mean, I can't even describe the impact it had, but all she said in response to me saying no was, "Well, I'll never forget." And it brings me to tears every time I bring this up because I know at that time what I was capable of. And I know that, I had, I mean, I was a man whom I did not respect. And the way that I also look at it too, if I'm being very candid, is in that moment, and mind you, I'm 39 now. I was in my early 30s at the time. In that moment, I had realized that I had become the version of my father that I did not respect. And, this isn't a slight on him by any stretch, but, those behaviors were something that I witnessed often growing up. And that was the moment I realized that I could no longer like lie to myself. I could no longer accept the bullshit that I was feeding myself, and I had to do something drastic. And a client of mine at the time had recently had a journey with a shaman here in California and made the connection. And I knew in that moment, like this was what I was supposed to do. And again, the very first, journey with MDMA, the things that were revealed to me were the root of my rage. I won't go into extreme detail here, but from that day, and I do mean literally from that day, it's been a handful of years now. I have not, I've been angry, but my experience of anger has been 180 degrees different. And I 100%, it's not even a question. It was at the hands of the medicine and the support in which I was receiving while on my journey.
Right on. Wow. Good work.
Yeah. So that was a Cliff Notes version, a very long Cliff Note of, the importance and why I think the work that you're doing is so significant. And I would love to, like I said, I shared that to kind of just give some little details about, how it's impacted me. And I would love to hear from you, being someone that's been in these journeys and facilitating them, and having the depth of knowledge you have around the medicines themselves. I would love to know genuinely, for my own interest, just kind of what you're working on, what you're teaching, how you like to talk about these things, because I, as someone who's just experienced them as someone in the healing seat, I want to better understand, and hopefully someday move into a position where I'm able to hold space and facilitate, journeys in the future. So I'd love to know, again, you can take that wherever you wish, but just your thoughts and tidbits and whatever it is that you'd like to make sure I and others hear.
There was a lot of questions in that.
Sorry.
I would say for anyone listening who's also wanting to start potentially facilitating, that it's something to get in with lots of caution and a lot of personal work yourself, right? Like it takes a lot of, I think it takes a lot of experience to do this well, because the nature of our own psyche is that we we project on to each other. And when you're facilitating, you're in this position of power, and it can get really sketchy. So there's really a need to very well know yourself and very well understand these medicines, in my opinion. That's even up for debate. But yeah, the world of psychedelics and how it's unfolding in the mainstream is a really interesting, exciting, kind of scary thing that is happening right now. For the longest time, it's been in the underground. People couldn't talk about it. Now suddenly it's emerging, and it's being pioneered by the medical model, which it's great, and it's giving legitimacy. We have the research, we have the numbers, we have the science to say, hey, this is actually really helping people's lives. This is treating things that SSRIs and all kinds of other medications. It's treating symptoms and problems that SSRIs weren't able to make a dent in. And MDMA is now finishing its trials and getting legalized by MAPS. So, thank them all for helping legitimize it in everyone's eyes. But when it's just the medical model pioneering this, it creates a world that falls into many of the medical model pitfalls, and there's a lot of pitfalls to fall into. So one of my projects is I work with the Global Psychedelic Society. I'm one of the stewards. And what a psychedelic society is, because it's kind of, what is it? They're basically community-led organizations that have popped up all around the world on their own accord. Nobody has been orchestrating it. People have kind of heard about it and going, oh, in the UK or in San Francisco, which is one of the first ones, people are getting together and they're having conversations. It's almost like a mini conference. People get together to listen to an expert give an hour-and-a-half presentation. And there's some mingling, and people get to chat about it afterwards, and they go home, and this is an event, and that's one format. There's actually multiple formats. So that's the education model, but there's also integration circles where people are getting together just to talk about what happened to them, what came up for them in their last journey, how it's unfolding in their day-to-day life, maybe what their fears are as they're preparing to go into their first journey, whatever it is. There's also psychedelic storytelling sessions, and open mics, and basically, you think about it, if it falls in the field of psychedelics, people are getting together around it, and it's happening at a psychedelic society, hopefully near you. And so these psychedelic societies, they exist. There's over 300 around the world, and you can learn about them more on our website. You can find the ones that are near you. It's globalpsychedelic.org. But it's an interesting model. Events is never necessarily lucrative, and though some of them have figured out how to fully thrive at it, it's also hard. So being a good business person and running a community are different skill sets. They don't always overlap, and so our job is to get those leaders together to learn from each other, help figure out what it takes for them to thrive. And we're raising money, and we're creating teams, and we're doing the investigation of what is the best business models, how can we templatize them for other people who want to start a psychedelic society in their community. How can we as a psychedelic society connect with accountability and ethics practitioners in the space? Because there's one of the warning signs of new facilitators is, like I said, things go awry. They're not always necessarily acting in integrity. But what does a community do when something like that happens? They don't always have somebody to connect to. So, we're wanting to build those bridges with experts in the field. And so we are on a mission to help new people find psychedelic communities so that they can learn about psychedelics in the community space versus just the medical. Also, when they're coming out of the medical model, they can come to the community afterwards, or during, whatever. But they all work complementary. And a lot of people, they're here learning about psychedelics, they're stoked about it, they're going to go research it and figure out how to get some 5-MeO DMT and work on it on their own, but might not have the money to deal with a therapist to help them unpack it later on. And okay, here's your psychedelic community with the integration circles. We can help you figure that out.
There's so many things here that I can attest to, having had now several experiences, both an individual experience being supported by someone, so it was just me under the medicine, and then being in different, in some cases, larger group settings where, it was being facilitated by one or a couple, but there were, anywhere between 15 and 20 people under a medicine. And the importance of the facilitator understanding how to navigate and support whatever comes through. I've been in an experience where the facilitator themselves got in over their head really quickly because someone was having an experience that was very necessary for them, but the facilitator wasn't prepared for quite frankly, the trauma that came through, that this person had endured. And I was on the front lines of being a part of that while too under the medicine. It was a very interesting experience. But, if there's anything that I would say to anyone who has never done it but is curious, or who is also interested in, potentially supporting, respect the medicine. Period. Like, it's not a game.
Slow.
It's not a game. And it's not about fun. It's not about a party. It's not about any of that stuff. But and obviously each medicine is a different experience. So based on what I've done, I could, what I would recommend based on my limited experience would be, certain ones to begin with, just based on my journeys. But the importance of respecting the medicine, I think is paramount. And like you said, having a facilitator that is seasoned, not just with medicines, but also understands, at the very least, the basics of psychology and being trauma informed. Because the way the facilitator I was with that day, I was actually appalled, if I were to put it lightly, at how he was trying to manage this person while they were in a very difficult space. It was very counterproductive. And
a lot of people are getting traumatized in their journeys where
you're
they
wide
need
open.
more work, right? You're so wide open. And
Yeah.
whatever bullshit your facilitator might not have processed for themselves, that's going to come up and influence your journey. Yeah. There's, I mean, these tools, like you said, this is not something to mess with. These are such powerful tools. And I think, they've been in the shadows, and prohibition has made it so it's not safe to talk about them. But now this is turning. So we need to get the information out. And part of the job of a psychedelic society is to educate people on how to vet your facilitator, how to really understand what you're getting into so that you are prepared as well as possible and not going to fall into a situation like what happened for you.
And the other side of respecting the medicine was the individual who was in the very difficult, journey at that time. Come to find out, he wasn't truthful with his experience. And he, for whatever reason, what I'm about to say is more of an assumption based on the experience. And it was, directly from the individual, because I had the opportunity to sit with the gentleman that was in the journey. I was having a difficult time after, I actually became his anchor. So when he came out of it, I was the one that he felt he could just literally sit there in silence with as he was processing what he just experienced. But he later revealed that, he basically embellished his experiences, and that he had not actually he's not as experienced under medicine as he had claimed. So what he did is he tried to keep up with, I think, someone or others that he was kind of, trying to connect with that were there in the group. And he took a dose that was not appropriate for him. So again, it was this, lack of respect for the power of these medicines. And, this isn't to scare anybody, but like you said, start slow, 100%. I think, I don't care who you are, start slow, because you can always be guided into a deeper experience if that's what you are prepared for. But whatever journey you take is the one you're going to be on. So, right.
Yep. And if you get yourself into that pinch, surrender and trust that something in there is going to help you grow one way or the other.
Right.
And trust rather than fight it. Right.
And I agree, whatever it is, even if it gets a little uncomfortable, that's the work. That's what you're there for. right?
Yeah.
And in the right setting, you're 100% taken care of. But I think the other part of this that is so important that I think many miss, especially if they're kind of doing it with amateurs, or in casual settings, is the post journey integration, right? The ability to now unpack and make sense of whatever came through, I think, is something that, so many, whether it's a financial thing or whether it's the community in which they're having their experiences or whatever it may be, so many are missing out on the power of the post journey integration.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it's just for a lack of awareness. So this is the work, right? To like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a buzzword, but it's a buzzword we should all know. It's simply taking that outside experience and bringing it into our lives and figuring out how to take the learnings from it and implement them as actual actionable change on
Mm-hmm.
a regular daily basis. And yeah, there's lots of pitfalls because the journey is exciting and the work always is, and the integration work isn't necessarily as exciting. But
Mm-hmm.
I think as it becomes more of a collectively known term and people, there's memes popping up about it, and they're hilarious. We're slowly getting there. I think
All
people
right.
are recognizing how necessary it is.
Well, and I'll also say that every 70s rock album cover now makes so much sense to me.
Right. Oh my God.
I see the art and I'm like, oh, I get it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, oh, that's funny. So the other thing, just to shift slightly, because I know this is we could go down a big rabbit hole here, but not to keep that loop open. I think it's, again, if I could offer one gift to every person in the entire world, it would be, uh, at the very least, a single journey, with a medicine that calls to them, because I believe that's a huge part of it, um, in a setting that is supportive and conducive to the actual healing. I think, I mean, there's no way the world doesn't come out, you know, the way it's supposed to.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't think it is for everyone. I think there's a lot of people who aren't. I mean, of course, if they could get the benefit from the psychedelic experience without necessarily giving up the control, but a lot of people are like, no way, dude. I don't want to get rid of that control. And I think there's other ways. I think the idea the psychedelics are extraordinary, and
Hmm.
but they're just a tool. They're a way of getting
Hmm.
to means, and I think that means is that, like, can we get out of the monkey mind
Hmm.
and connect to this life in different ways? And so, breath work and meditation
Hmm.
and even ice baths and, like, I mean,
Hmm.
ecstatic dance. There's so many different ways to get us out of the monkey mind into the body, into the spirit a little more, and to connect to life out of just our head. And so, if I love the idea underneath giving everyone an experience, but I think it's also just like give everyone an experience of getting out of your head.
I love that.
Because it's the head that seems to be causing so much of the problems that we're dealing with in this world today.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that correction, because you're absolutely right. Again, what I'm referring to is, if I could give anyone a gift, it would be the experience, the freedom that I experienced in those journeys, the detachment from, the old limiting beliefs and trauma stories that I was carrying. That's the gift I wish all could receive. And however one finds, what works for them, I mean, that's what matters most. I don't think there's one way for everyone. I say this all the time, in my coaching work. It's like, I believe that, all the strategies that are often used or referenced in the healing spaces, I don't care if it's music, breath work, Kundalini, psychedelics. I mean, the list is very long. I don't care what combination of those things someone uses. I believe they all work 100%, but I don't believe they all work for everyone at all times. I think
Totally.
they would all work for everyone, but depending on where that person is, what they're receptive to, what their experience have been, there's obviously so many layers that we all bring to the table that, I do believe healing work is dare I use the word, a bit of a cocktail, right? A mix of various tools at any given time to help us kind of work through and again detach from the monkey mind as you're describing it. That I definitely understand. Um, that's that's the gift. So thank you for correcting me and challenging that notion a little bit, because you're absolutely right.
I've just had enough people be like, I don't want, like, I don't want psychedelics. And I have to be like, and I mean, they have been such a huge catalyst. I had a lot of trauma as a kid. I was
Hmm.
completely like stuck in my mind. I felt like my mind was a jail cell and
Hmm.
I could not think new creative thoughts to get out of it. And if it weren't for the psychedelics, and actually, I also, I studied Kundalini yoga. I became a teacher.
Hmm.
I think that played a big role in it. Finally, being able to sit still with myself.
Hmm.
But yeah, if it weren't for all of these things that got me out of the monkey mind, I who knows where things would be. But I don't think they'd be pretty. And yeah, I'm so grateful.
Same.
And I've had to like temper my enthusiasm because people are like, if it's not for them, it's not for them. And I'm like, okay,
Yep.
I will allow, if anything, my hope is that I inspire others when they see me like doing rad stuff and be like, oh,
Hmm.
psychedelics was a big part of what helped make that happen. But I am definitely,
Yep.
yeah, trying not to evangelize too much.
Are you a coach who has been struggling to do everything yourself? I mean, all of the content, the emails, the marketing, not to mention every time you open your phone, there's a new social media strategy that someone is pitching that just makes you feel like you'll never be able to keep up. When all you really care about is helping people in a meaningful way while building the kind of coaching business your family can depend on. I'm Matthew Paetz, the founder of Momentum, a growth agency that specializes in helping coaches just like you break through your first 100K. If you're a coach who is tired of trying to figure it all out themselves and you just want to build a business that works, then I'm going to encourage you to click the link in our show notes to take your 100K coaching assessment to find out if you're ready to unlock your six-figure potential today. No, and I can understand that too. And what I would say based on my experience, and correct me or shift this as you see fit. Um, if you're someone who, and if you're this person, you're going to resonate with what I'm about to say. I believe it's a knowing more than this, like, saying the right words all the time. But if you're someone who genuinely wants to better understand yourself, you want to do that reflection, you want to, kind of go inward and connect dots, and like I said, better understand yourself is the easiest way I think I can put it, then perhaps a medicine journey is appropriate, right? And whatever medicine you feel called to, great. But if you're someone that is in a place where you're still wanting to escape your struggles or the anxieties or if it's this need to escape something, I would caution it, right? Because I don't think the
Yeah.
medicine is one to be used as a tool of escape, but rather one to be respected as a tool of deeper understanding, if that's what you feel led to experience.
Um, there's a lot of conversation and a lot of caution around the idea of how do I want to navigate this one? It's like there's people in pain, and there's
Hmm.
like I don't know if I really want to condemn people using substances to regulate themselves. Um,
Hmm.
like alcohol, sugar, caffeine. Like I had a lot of dysregulation in my nervous system. I was
Yeah.
like in severe anxiety, felt very unsafe in my own being, and if it weren't for that pyramid of shit, the sugar,
Hmm.
caffeine, alcohol, like I don't know how I would have made it through.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it helps. I get torn because I mean, on one level, I'm like, yeah, don't do your drugs to escape.
Hmm.
Like that's not, don't use psychedelics to escape. But actually, I mean, I don't know if it's as clear cut as that. because the
Hmm.
reality, it's like, how about don't abuse them to escape? Maybe don't use them to
Love.
the detriment, right? Because like, I'm sorry, like I've had really difficult times where I'm like, well, I don't want alcohol because that really, like, I'm done with alcohol. I barely have like a half a glass and I feel bad. Like, I am now connected with
Hmm.
my body enough that I'm able to feel how harmful it is for my system. So I'm really grateful for that. However, like, ketamine is an interesting, fun medicine to work with.
Hmm.
And, it's kind of controversial, but like, the truth is, I will have both very cathartic, beautiful, expansive experiences on the dance floor with ketamine
Hmm.
in my system. And it won't be exclusively an escape. It will be, wow, I'm connecting to my body in these different ways, and I'm connecting to space and the music, and I'm enhancing, and it's beautiful. And also, I'm getting out of my like monkey mind. I'm escaping it. Like, I'm tired of this guy running the show right now, and I want to like
Hmm.
get into a different way. Is that escape? Is that relief? Is that bad? I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's as black and white. However, I am a big fan of not abusing these things
Yeah.
to a detriment of my system or of how I show up in relation to other people. So, and that's my personal opinion. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I don't know. There's just like a lot of gray zones in between it all, and I don't think it helps people who do need to use these substances to regulate themselves. Um, to like condemn it or create shame or badness around that.
Of
And there's a
course.
term called, yeah, psychedelic exceptionalism, with this idea of like, oh, we only use our drugs for the proper way, and it's
Oh
like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it gets a little murky in between, right? But I mean,
yeah,
we're all like trying to figure it out. So thanks for
yeah.
opening that question there.
I really appreciate this too because in your responses, I'm finding myself challenged, and I love this because when the story that you were just describing about being on the dance floor, like what I was hearing is, because I think this is also a beautiful part of the medicines is it promotes and allows for authentic expression,
Mhm.
whatever that might look like, right? In whatever form that may take. And I think that's something that um, most everyone, dare I put a some sort of quantifying phrase to this, but I think the mass majority of us are suffering from a lack of self-expression. And one of the best ways I ever heard the word depression described, right? And this is with respect to the ones that do have a clinical, there's a really legitimate form of depression that they're going through. But in my experience, how often that word is used, or the way that it's kind of accepted in society is misconstrued, right? And the best definition I've ever heard for me about depression was depression is nothing more than denied expression,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And when you consider myself being someone who has, experienced bouts of depression and work with many who are currently and have been themselves, I mean, I would argue that 100% of the time, in some level, whether conscious or otherwise, there was what's the word I'm looking for? Um, it'll come to me later. A suppression is the word I'm looking for, of self, of truth, of a form of expression that they feel called to do, whether that be art, whether that be story, which is art, whether whatever it is, they are suppressing it to the degree that their body, in my opinion, their soul is just it's just starting to just kind of you know curl up
Atrophy.
because yeah. And I think that's that discomfort that most feel is, it's not that the world is wrong or bad or that they're often they believe they're broken. There's no such thing as broken. I think it's they're denying themselves something that can no longer rest dormant. Like it's yearning for some sort of expression.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's for sure something that's happening, right? But I think it's like, I don't know. I've recently had a journey where I was like, this was just a few weeks ago, where I was like, I
Mm.
forgot who I was. Um, like, after the journey, because, or like halfway through the journey, I like got energy and I started being able to sing and dance and participate in an active way. It was an ayahuasca ceremony, and it
Mm-hmm.
was the second night, and the first night was me kind of just like with stomach ache, feeling very sluggish and out of it, and just like not having a good time really, but doing the work. And um, Afterwards, I came out like that second night. Suddenly, I was like, "Oh my god, I can participate! I can have fun!" I forgot who I was because of exactly what you described. Um,
Mm-hmm.
However, I just feel like there's so much to it. It's like I think we are all within each one of us brilliant creative souls filled with so much potential. Like every single human
Mm-hmm.
on this planet has the potential to be brilliant. However, we receive all this programming and conditioning and trauma that
Mm-hmm.
forces us to protect ourselves, forces us
Mm-hmm.
to shut down. Oh, stop being so sensitive. Stop being such a baby. We're telling
Mm-hmm.
ourselves we're wrong all the time in order to be able to survive in whatever the difficult circumstances we are in. And
Mm-hmm.
that builds, and that's like all the adrenaline, all the cortisol, all of that goes flowing through our body,
Mm-hmm.
hardens in a shell that is not just, physical, which I think it is, but also um, emotional in a protective mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think our desire for survival is driving the need to create this shell around us of protection. And I also think the seed of potential is rich within that. But I don't know if it's just that the seed potential wanting to get out is creating the pain and depression and not being able to, or if it's this, protective mechanism that survival, that we are lucky enough to have been able to protect ourselves in these ways.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know, it's an interesting thing because I think they all play roles, but I get frustrated with some of the personal self-help work out there because it's just like
Yep.
positive affirmations, you've got it, and I'm like, bullshit. Until
Mm-hmm.
you recognize all the, I mean, at least for me, and this was my personal experience with what I'm reading and everything else, is that
Yep.
until I recognized the I didn't have to necessarily re-experience the hard memories of my traumas,
Mm-hmm.
but I did have to experience and witness the pain and maybe the
Mm-hmm.
thought processes that came from it that were in my body. I almost had to like go through all these hard experiences of my body, and my body
Mm-hmm.
curled up feeling like shit, negative thoughts, looping thought patterns. Like I had to witness all of that over many ceremonies actually, and then as I witnessed it, it released. As I witnessed it, released, and I became less protected, less guarded, more connected to myself, more
Mm-hmm.
connected to the brilliant soul within. And the reason why I forgot myself in this last ceremony is because I've been, like I said earlier, working really hard, and like my one of my addictive thought patterns or whatever
Mm-hmm.
bad behaviors, coping mechanism is workaholism, and I
Mm-hmm.
would troll away on my computer, and I was really trying to get a deadline through, and I didn't make it, but I like completely shut myself down so that I forgot how to have fun, how to be
Mm.
bright and shine my light, and it was annoying. And so
No,
anyway,
that's beautiful. And there's a couple things here that you touched on that I'm loving. But I would love your thoughts on an idea that I have. So as I'm kind of witnessing our conversation in real time and my experience of it as we share, different sides of kind of a similar coin. Um, how much do you think our inabilities to articulate these experiences get in the way of kind of, I want to say like inspiring or allowing others, not just who haven't, but those that maybe even experience themselves. Like as we're saying, let me try to make this clear. Like I described my perspective of like, don't use it for escape, right? And then you had your perspective on that, which I loved. And that's the moment that I started to think about it. It's like how often are our attempts to put language to these experiences actually kind of becoming the blocks or the hurdles from what it really is or what it's really all about. Like putting language to a soul experience. Like is that even possible?
you're talking to a filmmaker and a storyteller, so I'm always trying to figure it out. Like I
Yeah.
spend all my days sitting there being like, what if I said it like this? Would it land?
Yeah.
Would it resonate? I mean, I think language is really interesting, and I think how would you know about it if I didn't tell you? And
Yeah.
will it ever be truly accurate? No, because when I say this word, I mean this, and you understand it to mean something else, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah, I do feel like, okay, you probably have to just try it to understand it, and then also understand that you might need to try it 10 times. I had to drink ayahuasca 8 times before I had a mental experience. Like, they were all
Mm.
physically grueling, completely non-visionary, completely boring, completely dull. Um, and I ended up going to the jungles of Peru and working with shamans and going on dieta and doing this like pretty hardcore path to break through. And when I finally broke through, I was like, okay, wow, this is my medicine. And after that, like,
Mm.
my life started to make much more rapid steps in getting itself together. Um, but yeah, I kind of feel like you just gotta try it to really figure it
Yeah.
out, to really
And I
know.
think, we're talking about medicines, but I think this is parallel too to experiencing love, to experiencing inspiration, to experiencing any of these things that I would argue are um, genuine experiences of a soul's authentic expression. I think the soul can experience struggle too, right? We obviously do. But so I don't want to say that the soul can, it's only a soul experience if it's this like super enlightened, super, quote unquote positive type of thing. But I find that it feels like my soul is awake and playing, quite frankly, when I can describe something as inspirational or as love or as connected or, aligned or whatever the terminology we may, attempt to find. I feel like that's where this part is just like available,
Mm.
right? It's not behind all of this. And, as someone myself who, I always joke about getting into psychology because, I always say like, you don't get into psychology because you have your shit together. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that. I don't think any of us have our shit together, but I definitely did and do not. But the thing that came to me too, as you were describing needing to kind of experience those pains, again, to release them. Uh, Something came to me when I was journaling the other day that I recognize as a part of my journey. Psychedelics just happened to be this important milestone in the process. But if I look at life just prior to that and life since, the work up to psychedelics and with psychedelics early on was, I realized me taking responsibility and genuinely accepting what my life had been up to that point, accepting my experiences, accepting my choices, accepting, the parts of me that I didn't respect and I didn't like and all of that stuff, like genuinely accepting, not judging, not trying to fix, not any of that stuff, but just accepting that it, it was what it was. And for me to, I realized that I had to take responsibility for who I was and the experiences I had, both chosen and
You
circumstantial,
froze. Oh,
before I could take responsibility for the future I could create. Right. And what you were saying earlier with all this positive psychology stuff, which I don't disagree with positive psychology. I just don't think it's the one. And, it's too heavy handed in one direction, I think, for many, just as other modalities are as well. That's why I say, like, I believe healing is a cocktail, right? It's an appropriate mix of different things for each of us to really start to unlock the key or to the key to unlock ourselves. Right. But when I was thinking about this, it's like so many of us, right now it's the beginning of the year. It's what, January 8th. So, resolutions are a hot topic for many people, right? And resolutions really are just goals. And, as I sat there and thought about why myself included, do so many of us struggle to, one, accomplish the goals we set, or two, once we accomplish them, maintain them, right? Sustain the change. And what I believe to be true is that many of us are overcompensating or attempting to overcompensate for something we're struggling with, right? Versus accepting it, for what it is, experiencing it head on, and allowing it to move through so that we can move forward. And I think so many people, their goals are outside of what their current identity will allow them to experience long term. And I truly believe that identity is the key here. Right. I heard Peter Sage, and I'll turn it over to you to hear your thoughts on this. I heard a quote by a gentleman named Peter Sage in a TED talk of his. And he said that no one, I forget exactly how I phrased it, but he said, no one can outperform the opinion they have of themselves.
That's
Right?
great.
Which is really just an identity conversation, right? It's like, who do you believe yourself to be? Who do you believe, what do you believe you're capable of? What do you believe you're worthy of? And all these things, like the identity that's often developed is developed in childhood, right? No matter our experiences, we develop our original identities around between the age of like 6 and 7 is when it starts to, really take root. And from that point forward, we make the decision that this is who we are, what we're capable of, et cetera, based on our experiences and the environments that we're raised in, only to then become adults operating from this limited, perspective of who we are and what we could possibly be in the world, because we're comparing ourselves to so much of what we could and quote unquote couldn't do, growing up. So this idea of like identity transformation, that's really the journey that I believe we're all on, is like understanding and go, who do you want to become? And then how would that person show up to their fitness, their health, their relationship, their finances, etc. versus I need to make this much money this year. I need to lose this amount of weight or gain this amount of weight or whatever the goal or resolution may be. Instead of like hitting this arbitrary number, it's like, well, who do I need to become in order to create that and better sustain it once we arrive?
Beautiful. Yeah, I really appreciate that Peter Sage quote. And the way you framed it, of there just being a conflict with our own understanding of our identity. I teach storytelling, and I do it in two ways. One, I teach it for teachers and guides and facilitators, entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
to better unpack how they've reconciled that identity conflict,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's for those who are wanting to share it to inspire others, so that you learn how do you get that in that, like, that big story that's going to resonate with your audience, and share it in 5 to 10 minutes in a big way. But when it comes to working with people one-on-one who are still in the process of actually mending that conflict of that identity within themselves, I think it's really fascinating to create a timeline of your life, where
Mm-hmm.
you list, and you say, okay, what's one of the struggles that I, like, I have a goal, I want to make a bunch of money. Well, let's look at what your life experiences and your stories around money have been, and you like you just map out on a timeline all of the significant memories you have around money. And I mean, some of them might be insignificant. That's great. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
one of my students was like, I just remember my dad pulling out money, wanting to buy me some candy when I was 5 years old, and his wallet was very threadbare, and there was like one or two like single bills in there, and I felt really bad for asking for the thing, and I put it away. And there was this feeling of, we don't have enough. There, like, I should make myself small. I shouldn't ask for what I want, and like, as she started to unpack that, and a few others, there's this thing of like, hey friends, those hard experiences you had in your early formative years, they're not, they're they happen to you, but that's just like the beginning of a program. It's
Mm-hmm.
not actually indicative of your own worth. There's nothing inherent. It's just that you went through these situations, you came up with a meaning. But I went through these situations, I came up with this meaning. You came up with those situations. They're all just like, I like to look at them as programs. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, we live our lives according to that program now. Oh, I'm going to always make myself small because nobody has money, and I shouldn't be a burden on anyone to ask for
Mm-hmm.
what maybe I'm worth, right? And so how does that
Mm-hmm.
unfold in your current day life? It's like, it's a formula. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating once we get away, like a bird's view, and shift our perspective to those stories and start to look at them. Then you can start to realize you're living according to a formula. It's not on you. It's not about your inherent value or worth at all. And that starts
Mm-hmm.
to, I think, really starts to shift that identity conflict you were mentioning. It's exciting stuff.
This this is so amazing, and I love that storytelling is your craft, your art, because it's something that have. I actually feel. How do I want to say this? I guess I get a little self-conscious when it comes to storytelling because, I have this idea that, I'm not that good at it yet. So I can find myself being very in my head while attempting to share a story or while sharing a story, actually. But I believe that started to show up for me because I've recognized the power in storytelling. It's something that I never really understood or took much, concern with for much of my life. As someone that grew up performing physically, sports, etc., like storytelling was never, paramount to my being. But as I've gotten older, and especially in the work that we do, like, hearing stories and listening to stories and sharing my own and understanding the difference of, because I came up through the trauma space because of my own traumas naturally. And, one of the biggest shifts for me around story is when I realized that the way that I was describing my experiences was from this place of being in it still. Like I was describing it as I was still in it versus doing the work to be able to describe my experiences from a place of being with it. Right. And how that can shift for others to be able to see themselves inside of what I may or someone may be sharing, versus comparing themselves to the story. Um, you know, because I find that we often will treat our stories almost like competitions, right? Or our traumas rather as competitions, where it's like if you were to share your upbringing and all the details that you remember and that you felt were significant, good, bad, or otherwise, you know, I, on this side of the conversation, may think to myself like, oh, who does she think she is? Like she doesn't know shit. She hasn't been through anything I've been through. Right. And I could minimize your experiences. Or the other would be true. Whereas I hear your story, I could think to myself like, whoa, who am I to feel the way I do about my life? Like I've not been through anything this person has. And I would minimize mine versus because we're comparing context, right? Or our interpretation of each other's context rather. And, through paying a little closer attention to story and in the framework of story and how one can convey many different points and lessons and experiences by understanding how to frame, an experience is, I'm just finding so much respect for it. And I think that's where like my, oh shit, kind of comes in because I'm like, oh shit, it's like the medicines where it's like I respect it, but I because that I know I'm not there yet with it.
You should take my class. I'm going to offer
Hey,
a
let's
next visit
chat.
of it in February.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It brings to mind what you said, this quote from Marianne Williamson. We all know the first part of it. Um, so but the part that I want to speak on is she says, your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you.
Mm,
We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
mm,
She's on to some good stuff there, right? Like,
mm-hmm,
you know, so what, like, maybe, to any listener who's like, but my trauma was so big, and the thing about it is
mm-hmm.
your trauma might be so big and somebody else's might be a little bit small, but the way they handled the small thing might be insight for how you could navigate some aspect of your big trauma, right? Like, it's just
Yep.
never, they don't compare the way we can measure how tall we are. It's an interesting
Mm-hmm.
thing. But I think that the rule on that is just like, stop comparing. The comparing game just never works for any of us, right?
No, and it really doesn't. And I know it's something that's, widely spoken, and there's, countless Instagram memes that say that or some variation of that. But uh, I think like a lot of, I think like wisdom in general, anything that's genuinely wise, that's ever spoken, uh, at first sounds whatever, right? It's like too easy or it's too trivial or it's like doesn't really make sense, right? It sounds cheesy even in some cases. But when you really commit to your own path, whatever that looks like, and I do mean your own, where you start to put the shutters on, right? You start to say, okay, I'm making a decision that uh, I'm going to take my life in this very specific direction, whatever that is for someone, but it's done consciously, not by way of the wind hitting your sails in a different way today than it did yesterday. And you're just going to see where it takes you. But like when we embark on a journey that is chosen and deliberate, I think then, these stories, these snippets of someone's conversations that are just drenched in wisdom become understood, right? They become felt experiences versus just, these kind of nice sounding words that some people will use sometimes. So I love it. I'm just finding that, the deeper we go, the simpler things actually are. And actually the more simple they are, the more depth we feel, right, in those experiences. And I've subscribed recently to a philosophy of essentialism, and I'm very new to it. So by no means am I the expert on this, but really the thing that I subscribe to most is kind of their mantra, which is just a simple sentence of less but better. Right. Where it's like once you identify, it's like once you identify your path, that's the first part. That takes a ton of work to even get there. But once you identify the path that you are going to deliberately choose, then it becomes, how do we eliminate the distractions, or, the term I've come to use for this is what are the things that we need to unsubscribe to so that we could stay in track, stay on this lane. And in doing so, life become, the things become less, but life becomes better.
Gorgeous. That's that's all my medicine journeys keep bringing me back to these super profound truths, and it's just like, spend more time outside. It's like these very simple things, like nurture your relationships that you value, and you're like, no kidding, buddy, and it feels so profound in the moment, and then afterwards you're like, wait a minute. But the fact that I love this philosophy. I'm gonna look into it more. It's very much like, especially in this day of like oversaturation of information and entertainment, there's so much, and I find myself getting when I am not on my A game, if I'm in my workaholic game, then I end up actually spending more time on my phone zoning out, doing stupid shit and like multitasking than I would if I was being more intentional. And the quality of my life goes down because of all this distraction, and it's so, yeah, that's beautiful. I look forward to looking into that more.
Yeah, I love this. So, with respect to the time, I would be very curious to hear, because I know you made reference to a program that you're gonna, or a class or whatever it is that you're gonna be launching again here. It sounds like February. I would love to know more about what you're creating, and would love to invite, anyone who resonates with this into, because you certainly have my attention.
Beautiful. Yay. Thank you. Yeah, I am offering a course called Articulate Your Wisdom, Story Crafting for Leaders, Creatives, Entrepreneurs, and Guides. And, I believe we all have these powerful stories to tell, even if you're like, oh, my life's been kind of quiet and kind of boring. I think if you were to take the time and like run it through these exercises, through these different processes, you're going to learn that you, within the ingredients of your life experiences, have some like real ingredients to you living your life, your fullest purpose, and to whatever your expertise is, whatever your wisdom is, whatever you have to share in this world. I think it exists in your life experiences, and it's just a matter of like taking the time. It's like we're sitting on these mountains of lived experiences, but rarely are we taught to like bring our now adult experience perspective to it and evaluate it. Because to your point earlier, you were like, yeah, our identity forms at this young age. We make decisions about who we are at this young age, and then we just run on autopilot from then on. But when you come to this, I feel like this is something that what I found is people under 30, it might be a little bit too early for them to do this. You might want to be 30 or over, for this process, because you're still learning. You need to max out on what you originally thought you were, and let that start to hit a wall before you can start stepping into who you truly are meant to be, I think.
I'm freaking out right now if no one can see me because I couldn't agree more. I think 30 just has this way of kind of introducing us to ourselves like no other, right? Even as I'm about to turn 40, it's a different experience than it was when I turned 30. Because if you think about your 20s, you enter leaving 19, you exit at 30. Like there's no decade so drastic, I think, than that one. And the quarter life crisis, midlife crisis, I think we all go through a quarter life crisis. We're just often inundated with children and all these kind of things that during that phase in our life, typically, so we don't necessarily feel it or can sit with it consciously as well as some do in their midlife. But I think all of those identity crisis that we experience inevitably are nothing more than the former identity's shelf life coming to pass. Right. It's just saying it's spoiled milk. They're like, this isn't working anymore. We need to update our software, our programming, so that we can continue to move forward as we were designed. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're examples or further evidence of our brokenness. I think it's quite the opposite. But thank you. Thank you. You're such a beautiful soul, and these conversations are amazing. And again, I love that you've challenged many of my thoughts today. And, I'm just such a fan of you and your work. And although we haven't known each other that long, it was immediate that you were someone that I knew was going to make a difference for me. And I'm super excited for anyone that has the opportunity to get to experience you in any capacity. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me, Matthew. It's been such a pleasure. Thanks for
Yeah.
receiving all the ideas and asking the good questions. And and for anyone who wants to follow along this journey and learn more about any of the things I've talked about, my website is yourstoryiseverything.com.
Mm.
The Global Psychedelic Society, again, is globalpsychedelic.org. And I do a lot of stuff on Instagram, so you can find me there at Mareesa_Stertz.
I love this. And by the way, I love that earlier. I'm like, is it our inability to articulate the soul and the wisdom? Is that our thing? And then you're like, so my course is articulate wisdom. And I'm like,
right?
Of course it is.
I think we all have wisdom inside of us. It's all there, right? It's just a matter of taking the time to figure it out.
Awesome. Well, you're beautiful. I appreciate you, and I'm going to let you get to your work. And again, I'll be here to support you in any way that you think would be of benefit. So let me know.
Okay. So good to be in touch. Thank you, Matthew. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.